you not perhaps afraid of what might happen to you as a result of making these revelations?
Oh, yeah. I probably am a dead man already.
Wherein all the power used to be centered in Europe, it's not centered in Europe anymore. It has divided itself up and is centered in different parts of this earth today. Much of it is in Asia. Much of it is in Africa. It has shifted. And as the people in Africa and Asia get some power of their own, they get a mind of their own. They start seeing with their own eyes and listening with their own ears and speaking with their own mouth and coming to definitions from their own brain.
Frustration itself has been sufficient, all that was necessary to make Negroes realize the importance of banding together. And Negroes are banding together.
Banding together in what kind of movements?
Different kinds of movements, all kinds of movements, and they remain almost invisible. They remain almost unknown, but yet they are there. When I say invisible, I mean invisible in the sense that their existence is unknown, and no matter how much you try and track them down, you can't find them. And this force that is so visible in the Harlem community creates a spirit of resentment in every Negro. They think they're living in a police state, and they become hostile toward the policeman. They think that the policeman is there to be against them rather than to protect them. And these thoughts, these frustrations, these apprehensions automatically are sufficient to make these Negroes begin to form means and ways to protect themselves in case the police themselves get too far out of line.
In January, and I had no intention, or rather March, and I had no intention of ever even speaking on this. Had they left me alone, you still wouldn't know what really took place.
Why are they threatening your life?
Well, primarily because they're afraid that I will tell the real reason that I'm out of the black Muslim movement, which I never told. I kept to myself. John Ali, the national secretary, admitted, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, one of these days last week, that they absolutely were going to kill me.
What steps would you take to protect yourself from this threat?
I take no steps. I have a rifle. If anybody comes to my house without a good reason, I intend to try and use it.
In fact, I think we'd be fooling ourselves if we had an audience this large and didn't realize that there were some enemies present.
If you have any idea of what it was like to be an African American living in the pre-60s, then what this man is saying should not be so hard to comprehend. A racial war was at its peak by the time Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, as previous decades of blatant and disregard for basic human rights was violated and accepted by the vast majority, including the government. It frustrates me, and yet at the same time amazes me, that the majority living in those times did not speak out and act upon the violence and one-sided cruelty black slaves received from their wealthy masters. Human beings sold like workhorses so that the immigrated white man could enjoy his wine and crackers without a hint of a broken nail. The way that these Masonic figures would end up in North America is a story on a whole other level, and involves yet again historical evidence of racial segregation and murder.
In early America, black slaves and white indentured servants are equally exploited.
Their work is what was valuable, not their person.
Then laws begin to distinguish between black and white.
1640 is sort of the turning point where Africans are going to be treated differently.
And slavery spreads across all the colonies.
People are being considered property.
The downward spiral begins.
An entire economy based on exploitation of Africans is in place within a generation.
Before 1800, more people came to America from Africa than from anywhere else, and most of them came in chains. Their toil helped make the United States the richest nation on earth. Slavery was no sideshow in American history. It was the main event. America was a slave-owning country longer than it has been a free one, and the legacy of slavery haunts us still.
We've made certain progress in race relations, but we'll never get further until we look more closely at slavery.
This is a story of resistance and the struggle to maintain human dignity. It is a story of the demand for freedom told through the lives of enslaved people.
Who are you? You don't know. Don't tell me Negro, that's nothing. What were you before the white man named you a Negro? And where were you? And what did you have? What was yours? What language did you speak then? What was your name? It couldn't have been Smith or Jones or Bunch or Powell. That wasn't your name. They don't have those kind of names where you and I came from. No, what was your name? And why don't you now know what your name was then? Where did it go? Where did you lose it? Who took it? And how did he take it? What tongue did you speak? How did the man take your tongue? Where is your history? How did the man wipe out your history? What did the man do to make you as dumb as you are right now? Who is his enemy? He'll say the Belgians. Ask the man in Kenya who is his enemy. He'll say the British. Ask the man in Morocco who is his enemy. He'll say the French. But the one thing that the French and the British and the Belgians all have in common, they're all from Europe. Is that right or wrong? How could so few white people rule so many black people? This is the thing you should want to know. How could so few? The white man today will tell you that thousands of years ago, the black man in Africa was living in palaces. The black man in Africa was wearing silk. The black man in Africa was cooking and seasoning his food. The black man in Africa had mastered the arts and the sciences. He knew the course of the stars in the universe before the man up in Europe knew that the earth wasn't flat. Is that right or wrong? Then if the black man in Africa had reached such a high state of civilization so long ago, at a time when the people of Europe were crawling on their all fours, what happened to make these people or enable these people to come out of the cave and come down into our civilization and take it over and hitch us to the plow? What happened? How did they do it? These are the things you should want to find out before you say hooray, hooray, hooray. Is that right or wrong?
You were born in Omaha, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And your family left Omaha when you were, what, 1 year old?
I imagine about a year old.
And why did they leave Omaha?
Well, to my understanding, the Ku Klux Klan burned down one of their homes in Omaha.
This,
had a lot of Ku
this
Klux
made
Klan.
your family feel very unhappy, I'm sure.
Well, insecure, if not unhappy.
So you must have a somewhat prejudiced point of view, a personally prejudiced point of view. In other words, you cannot look at this in a broad academic sort of way, really.
I think that's incorrect because despite the fact that that happened in Omaha, and then when we moved to Lansing, Michigan, our home was burned down again. In fact, my father was killed by the Ku Klux Klan. And despite all of that, no one was more thoroughly integrated with whites than I. No one has lived more so in the society of whites than I. And it was only until I became a Muslim that I ceased living in the society
You
of
say
whites.
you were thoroughly integrated with the whites, Malcolm.
Yes.
Do you have white people in your family background?
Definitely. Most Negroes in this country have whites in their family background because...
How are you going to differentiate between the white blood that's in you and the Negro blood that's in you? And you don't mind my using the term Negro because you use this yourself.
I use it interchangeably.
I know you do. Why do you do that?
Well, I use it if it fits the purpose to use it, but I use it against my will.
Do you? But
I use it against my...
You used it voluntarily in describing the incident in Los Angeles.
Still, I use it against my will.
I guess the teachings weren't thoroughly inculcated.
No, but when I say to you that the cops in Los Angeles shot down 7 unarmed Negroes, every Negro in the audience knows what I'm talking about. But when I say that they shot 7 Muslims, then a lot of the Negroes don't realize that you're
suppose you
still
said
talking
7
about
colored
Negroes.
people because you say you used the term colored people. You said...
I don't think I used the word
colored.
colored on this program.
Yes, you did. You did when we started.
Not colored.
I think so. Black people, I'm sorry. You did
Black.
say black.
Well, we can use black, and that fits everybody.
Okay.
But, sir, the black...
Now, let me get back to another point that you made. You said that you go back home. Now, what do you mean by back home?
I've only heard the Honorable Elijah Muhammad say, back among our own people. From
You
whence
said back home. You don't mind my saying.
Right, back home But by that he means...
Do you mean back into the roots of Islam, or do you mean back to Africa?
Back home. And by back home he means back into our original civilization. And if you study history, the Islamic culture existed in West Africa,
But your
Central
family
Africa.
didn't come from an Islamic background originally, did it? I mean, you came from the proud tribes of Africa, which is
I think you'll find, sir, that one of the the Islamic culture,
I agree, there is
existed widely in Africa, Central Africa, West Africa.
I agree. I've met many people in there. Mr. O'Connor.
With regard to that tragedy out there in Los Angeles, I myself refer to it when it happened as the tragic police action, so I am not totally biased.
Thank you, sir.
Coming from Muhammad Speaks, which is the publication of your cult or your religion, Elijah Muhammad, referred to the policemen out there, the white policemen, as devils. He said, "There is no justice here for us black people. There is no future for us nor our children in civilized America." Doesn't that imply that you're going to get out, or that's his wish that you get out?
If he referred to those policemen out there as devils, who were heavily armed and knew that the Negroes whom they were shooting down in cold blood were not heavily armed, I don't think that those policemen themselves would deny that they're devils, nor would any Negro who witnessed such a deed deny that they are devils.
Well, about the other part of it, there's no justice here for us black people. There's no future for us nor our children in civilized America. And I didn't make that up. He said it in his own
And he's correct in what he says, sir.
Well, what does it mean? Does it mean you're going to get out, or
It
what?
means the same thing that Attorney General Robert Kennedy means when he says that the #1 domestic problem in America is the race problem. That it is almost impossible to solve it. It's almost impossible to give justice to Negroes.
No Negro leaders have fought for civil rights.
What do you mean
They
by
have
fought?
begged for civil rights. They have begged the white man for civil rights. They have begged the white man for freedom. And anytime you beg another man to set you free, you will never be free. Freedom is something that you have to do for yourselves. And until the American Negro lets the white man know that we are really ready and willing to pay the price that is necessary for freedom, our people will always be walking around here second-class citizens, or what you call 20th century slaves.
What price are you talking about, sir?
The price of freedom is death.
Perhaps a significant reason for this would be that the FBI started a counterintelligence program called Cointelpro. This group was created by none other than FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover in an attempt to disassemble any anti-establishment groups by using whatever force necessary, and as it clearly states on Wikipedia, not limited to assassinations and public deception on a grand scale. Groups that posed a violent opposition for the government, such as the Black Panthers, were eliminated one by one.
In December of 1969, when the Panther 21 were in jail, Fred Hampton and Mark Clark were killed and others wounded in a pre-dawn raid by the Chicago Police Department on a home of members of the Black Panther Party.
The Black Panther Party's LA office was attacked. So there's a national program of repression against the Black Panther Party. Panthers were killed all across the country. Bunchy Carter and John Huggins were killed in Los Angeles. Joan Bird was beaten and tortured by New York City police.
With Cointelpro, they had a strategy. The strategy took on several forms. They wanted either to imprison people, to cause them to go into exile themselves, to, in case certain instances, to kill people, or just to destroy their lives.
Many of us came to see in the trial, or feel in the trial, that the law could be used for political purposes, could be manipulated, especially the conspiracy law. People began to raise bail money for the Panther 21. Dhoruba was one of those chosen to be bailed out by the party because he was acknowledged as a good speaker. His role was to bring awareness of the program of the Black Panther Party and to end the case of the Panther 21.
The issue is either or. Either you're part of the problem or you're part of the solution. And we take that position and we take the stand that we're not going to sacrifice realizing all of that any black leaders anymore. We're not going to do that.
Almost immediately, the FBI put him on what was called the agitator index, which was a list of individuals who would be incarcerated in concentration camps in the event of a national emergency. If you were on that list, you were a Cointelpro target.
The Black Panther Party that I had joined in '68 had evolved from Oakland, California. Bobby Seale, Huey Newton, they were in leadership. The federal government realized that that I was a leader in the Black Panther Party in New York and that there were differences between myself and the national leadership. So they carried out operations to drive a wedge between myself and the national leadership.
Cointelpro. What's Cointelpro? That was an FBI program. Every time blacks or other groups in the 60s would get together and really start feeding homeless at soup kitchens and getting communities together and getting kids off welfare, system didn't like that, or getting kids out of crime, they'd come in and radicalize until one black leader, the other black leader's talking bad about you, and get those two fighting. And they do that over and over again, so call up and say, he said another group that I really helped push and give national attention, and now they got all these chapters all over the country, and that's great. I just leave it alone and let it grow. Call up, I hear you threw him under the bus too. And then people start asking, I hear something was thrown under the bus, something was thrown under the bus. And then other chapters don't form. More independent groups don't begin. And we don't defeat the New World Order, and they get to carry out their more staged terror attacks, bring in their world government.
Black communities nationwide finally retaliated in what would become the first and only modern public revolt against the very establishment which enslaves us all, even to this present day. It would be because of these riots that African American citizens began to receive their equal rights. However, the media displayed nothing but negative feedback to these people standing up for their rightful freedoms. This would paint a dark image in the public's mind, and the media would often call them hoodlums or terrorists.
In 1965, riots raged in the Watts district of Los Angeles after news of police brutality spread through the neighborhood. Bringing to a head the volatile relations between blacks and the police, the riots continued for 6 days. 34 people were killed, 1,000 injured, and nearly 3,000 were arrested. It took 1,600 troops to stop the rebellion, which was the first in a series of nationwide urban riots.
Six days of rioting in a Negro section of Los Angeles left behind scenes reminiscent of war-torn cities. More than 100 square blocks were decimated by fire and looters, and few buildings were left intact. Firemen were harassed by snipers and brick-throwing hoodlums as they attempted to control the fires, many of which were left to burn themselves out. As the National Guard moved in to restore comparative calm, the losses by fire alone were put at $200 million. No attempt has yet been made to estimate the losses suffered at the hands of the looters who stole everything from liquor to playpens.
Rivaling street gangs, such as the Crips and Bloods, had to join forces as the National Guard set its sights on the Watts district of Los Angeles.
But then they brought in 16,000 National Guard who don't know the terrain.
The National Guard in particular is not necessarily trained to engage in civilian crowd control.
We wanted to drive them out. And so the question then is, what do we do?
And we were opportunistic fighters. We didn't need stockpiles. We got dilapidated buildings. Here's a brick pile just waiting to be thrown at your ass. Here's a dilapidated building. Ain't nobody living there. You didn't fix it. You didn't remove it. Okay, it ain't no but a pile of bricks anyhow. That's coming at you. That whole building, brick by brick, is coming at your ass. That's what we throwing at you. The building, the bullshit, the rubble, the rubbish that we live in. That's what's coming at your ass. Those are our weapons. The filth, the funk, the shit you can't stand, that you defend, that you put a barrier between us and yourself. That's coming at you. It's coming at you.
As far back as the 1920s, when he began as FBI director, Hoover had gone after persons like Marcus Garvey. Garvey's organization, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, had a membership numbering in the millions, and somehow Hoover found this threatening and worthy of surveillance and undermining attempts. Garvey's influence had been international and had drawn world attention to America's treatment of black people. Paul Robeson was another who was viewed by Hoover as an enemy. This reporter has personally examined thousands of FBI, CIA, and other U.S. government agency documents that were kept on Paul Robeson. Robeson, like Garvey, had an international audience at his command, and he used that platform to denounce racism in the United States.
Most importantly, however, were the questions raised by the State Department as to my political opinion. Here's a question of whether one who wants to sing and act can have, as a citizen, political opinion. And in attacking me, they suggested that when I was abroad, I spoke out against injustices to the Negro people in the United States. I certainly did. And the Supreme Court Justice just ruled, Judge Warren, in the segregation cases, that world opinion had a lot to do with that ruling, that our children, Negro children, can go to school like anybody else in the South. I'm very proud to have been a part of directing world opinion to precisely that condition. The second, that I fight for the independence of the colonial peoples of Africa. Bandung, the colored peoples of the world assembled and made it clear that nobody is going to tell them what to do. They're going to have the independence. I'm proud of that.
And this frightened many interests in this country. Many people in this country who want to see us the minority and who don't want to see us taking too militant or too uncompromising a stand are absolutely against the successful regrouping or organizing of any faction in this country whose thought and whose thinking pattern is international rather than national. There's a worldwide revolution going on. It goes beyond Mississippi. It goes beyond Alabama. It goes beyond Harlem. What is it revolting against? The power structure. The American power structure? No. The French power structure? No. The English power structure? No. Then what power structure? An international Western power structure.
For a time, black movement organizations remained elusive to agencies like the CIA and the FBI, and this is in part due to the fact that they would disassociate themselves with any whites due to the violence they received. As time went on, the intelligence community and law enforcement agencies began to recruit black infiltrators to find out information which could help to the disbanding of any of these groups that threatened the power structure. These spies would receive large sums of taxpayer dollars in the form of cash to find out and relay any information back to the FBI. It's hard to believe that in the events of all that has transpired and acts of racial cruelty, that anyone in the black community would betray their own people as they did, but this is the effect of the disgusting power money has on people. Hoover had his own racial agenda and known ties to the Ku Klux Klan. For nearly 40 years, he used this political power to disrupt and infiltrate America's black leaders and organizations, and would have the authority to commit crimes and felonies without receiving any repercussions. With the administration of the Cointelpro program, Hoover was successfully able to destroy much of what the black communities across the nation worked so hard to achieve, further delaying them in receiving equal rights as American citizens. A common tactic used by the Cointelpro program was to create tension and turmoil between black factions, to try and turn them on each other, which is why even to this day, black-on-black violence is discussed and many people in the public's eye are still not aware of the actual reasonings behind this. It is common knowledge now that the U.S. government was trying to destroy black communities all across the country, and it would use whatever means necessary to achieve this goal. This would include the introduction and distribution of crack cocaine, false flag operations, and in several instances, such as with Malcolm X and later Martin Luther King Jr., premeditated murder.
You gotta be flown or shipped.
There's a great line in the movie Boys in the Hood where Larry Fishburne is saying, hey man, we don't grow it, we don't own any airplanes, we don't have any laboratories, how does it get here? Why does it get here? And that's a very good common sense approach that intuitively the people in South Central understood, that there was something much bigger than them that was moving the whole drug issue and the drug war.
The Iran-Contra is very important in history. We have to remember the fact that Iran-Contra, its mandate was to investigate the sales of missiles to Iran.
Former DEA agent Celerino Castillo not only fought in the international effort of the American drug war, he also had the rare opportunity of carrying a camera and recording some of the regrettable actions of the DEA and CIA while they supported President Reagan and Oliver North's Contra movement.
George Bush Sr. came to Guatemala on January 13, 1986, and he approached me and asked me what I did there at the U.S. Embassy, what my job description was, and I told him I was a DEA agent working international narcotics investigations, and I told him, look, you know, we have gathered intelligence that the Contras are involved in drug trafficking down in El Salvador. And then he just smiled, shook my hand, and walked away from me. And it was then and there that I knew that my government knew that these atrocities were occurring.
In 1986, on American TV, we were all being fed a steady diet of,
we're taking down the surrender flag that has flown over so many drug efforts. We're running up a battle flag.
this scourge will stop. But regrettably, back in Central America and in the jungle,
I remember down in Central America, we were refueling planes full of cocaine coming into the U.S., and it was a CIA operation being run by the White House.
At the same time all of the cocaine from Nicaragua was flowing into the U.S., Freeway Ricky Ross was at his heyday.
The average week would at least be $2 to $3 million, almost guaranteed. Some days we would have $2 and $3 million days.
After Freeway Rick was arrested, an investigative journalist by the name of Gary Webb uncovered a link that connected him back to the Nicaraguan Contra movement.
So I read Dark Alliance. I got a copy personally from Gary Webb himself. And to read the book, it was fascinating for me, you know, to find out that I was connected with the CIA and all these high-powered people up in the government.
Ricky Ross was just lucky. He just happened to get a source who was connected to the CIA.
For a long time in South Central, the buzzword was that the CIA was selling crack. I said, no, the CIA wasn't selling crack. The CIA was importing cocaine. Ricky Ross got it, turned it into crack, and he sold it.
According to Gary Webb's Dark Alliance, when Danilo Blandón was displaced from his home country of Nicaragua, he set off to America to raise money to aid the Contras in ridding his home from the invading Sandinistas. When Ricky Ross was introduced to Blandón, Blandón was in a position to create a pipeline of cocaine that he in turn gave to Ricky Ross on consignment.
Which I like the sound of that, you know, because I was always trying to get to the top anyway.
Suddenly, some major sources opened up for him. Danilo Blandón, Norwood Meneses, both of whom were tied to the CIA and the Contras, and Gary Webb did a masterful job of breaking those stories and proving with documents that that was the case.
Whatever we were running in LA, the profit was going to the Contra-Revolution.
I started doing a little research on my own, and I read a little bit about Oliver North and the Contras, because I never knew what the Contras was before.
There's ledgers of Oliver North and them actually transporting the cocaine to our country. There's film. Every piece of document that's possible.
Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. First-time dealer and former Crip Leroy Chico Brown was arrested with Rick. Chico walked into a DEA sting operation that was set up to capture and imprison Rick in trade for Rick's old partner, Danilo Blandón.
How could this be possible? Then we read through the documents, and then that's when Gary Webb started explaining it to us, and we was like, everything came together now.
One of the most paramount moments, perhaps caused by Gary Webb's Dark Alliance, took place in November of 1996.
It was a monumental historic event. I mean, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency was coming to Watts to face the people.
Now, we all know that the U.S. government and the CIA supported the Contras in their efforts to overthrow the Sandinista government in Nicaragua in the middle 80s. Now, it is alleged the CIA also helped the Contras raise money for arms by introducing crack cocaine into California.
Deutsch felt he had to do something to try to deal with the outrage that was foaming all over the country at the time. And of course, it just blew up in his face.
CIA fights drugs. CIA does not encourage drugs.
I mean, it was actually one of the most monumental blunders of all time, if you think about it.
We have no evidence of a conspiracy by the CIA to engage in encouraging drug traffickers in Nicaragua or elsewhere in Latin America.
Deutsch was there because of the Gary Webb stories. The Gary Webb stories had sparked a national furor.
I would like to have Richie Ross's brother to speak, please.
The United States government turned their head and let this cocaine come into the United States of America.
Allow Gary Webb to have full access. This whole thing is orchestrated.
It was near pandemonium. It was about, I guess, 1,200 people in the standing room only in the auditorium, 2,000 people outside listening on loudspeakers. And it was very hard to keep control. I got called on finally, and I said to her very clearly, I was looking right at Deutsch. I am a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, and I work South Central Los Angeles, and I will tell you, Director Deutsch, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time. And I was able to name operations. Director Deutsch, I will refer you to 3 specific agency operations known as Amadeus, Pegasus, and Watchtower. I have Watchtower documents heavily redacted by the agency. I was personally exposed to CIA operations and recruited by CIA personnel who attempted to recruit me in the late 70s to become involved in protecting agency drug operations in this country. He stumbled and stammered and wrung his hands.
This document that you're looking at now shows how the FBI tried to divide factions within the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And the Black Panther Party was also subjected to heavy, heavy surveillance.
We knew the history of the FBI's infiltration tactics in other organizations, particularly the American Communist Party. There was already a record compiled that showed that the FBI was even in charge of various branches of the Communist Party. So we understood that police tactic of infiltration. There was a situation where, in a sense, the white racism was its own victim. Like, for racist reasons, J. Edgar Hoover had not recruited black agents. He had a lot of white agents. And it takes time to train some black agents. In the meantime, those white agents, try as they might, were not able to infiltrate our ranks because the Black Panther Party did not have any white members, okay? And we relied upon people that we knew. And we kept people that we didn't know on another level. And I think this is why we didn't suffer more, put it that way, because they did catch up and start a crash program of recruiting black agents, and they very quickly filled that gap, but it took them about a year to do it.
In the summer of 1978, I interviewed a man who worked as an informer for the FBI during the 1960s. His name is Dothard Perry, also known as Ed Riggs, also known as Bill Perry, also known as Othello. How were you paid?
The pay was always in cash. Cash, and you would sign a card. It would go like this. A rendezvous or a drop-off point would be picked out either by yourself or the agent. You would meet the agent there. Usually it would be in a vehicle. You get in the vehicle, he would hand you the money. He would tell you first to count the money. He would tell you the amount while you counted it. If the amount was there, he would then bring out a card. On that card would be for the week of such and such. In other words, the week was dated. So-and-so has been paid the amount of. Then you would sign the card, and then the agent would sign the card. The reason for this is that if all of a sudden the IRS became very interested about where you were getting all this extra money from, you could always tell them to go back to the Bureau, and the Bureau would have your cards on file.
I see. Were there such things as bonuses?
Oh, yes.
What were they paid for?
Bonuses were paid for, suppose while you were meeting with, or you were at a meeting with Bobby Seals, Chulai of the Red Army happened to come to the meeting too, which is something which would be a new development. That's bonus time.
In other words, a hot piece of information.
Hot piece, very hot piece.
Tell me about some of the cultural organizations that you infiltrated and what you did.
PASLA, Mafunde, Watts Writers Workshop, which they had.
The Watts Writers Workshop?
Yes. Watts Writers Workshop, which was one of the oldest established black writers workshop.
That place was burned down.
Yeah. The Bureau had it burnt down.
How do you know that?
I know because I participated. I did the arson.
You burned down the Watts Writers?
Yes.
Why did they want it to go?
At the time, funding had been cut to the workshop, had been cut out, but it looked like there was a possibility of a grant being given back to the workshop. And if there was no theater, there would be no grant.
How did you do it?
2 cans of kerosene, Purex bottle, gasoline, and a flare, highway flare.
Why didn't you use more sophisticated stuff?
Oh, no. No. You're never overly sophisticated. It's too obvious. This way you make it look like, you know, maybe somebody in the neighborhood that got kicked out of theater at one time got mad and came and burned the damn theater up, that kind of thing.
Did you ever suffer pangs of conscience?
Quite a few times. Quite a few times. I still suffer pangs of conscience. I suffer from the fact that a lot of people trusted me and I misused that trust. I suffer from the fact that a lot of information that I gave out was the undoing of certain groups or certain people. I suffer from the fact that I'm on the run constantly. I have no real life to speak of.
You have no family life, really? You have a wife?
No, I don't have a wife. I do have a child. I can't see her that often. I have to stay away from them because once I come around, the Bureau shows up and harassment starts. I have very few close personal friends, no one to really confide in. It's like being on the outside of a glass jar and everything is happening inside the jar, but you're on the outside. You can see it happening, but you can't participate.
Why have you decided to talk to me?
For the simple reason, I think this information should be getting out, should be put out to the public. I think not only black people, but everyone should become aware of what your so-called law enforcement agencies do to so-called enforce the law. Because between you, myself, and the audience, I've seen more felons in law enforcement than I have in prison.
Morning, how do you do? With the FBI, you have a couple minutes while I'm talking?
No, a couple. Your name is
Beckwith?
Beckwith?
Right.
And your name is Fulton. Fulton.
Right.
From which,
New York.
New York. There's only
one.
Only one here.
Is probably what you assumed we came for, to obtain any information you wanted to give us about the Muslims.
I didn't assume anything.
No. That's a very general statement on my part, but as you know, we follow the activities of the Muslims as best we can. But we're always looking for new avenues of information, and who better than the head of the Muslims.
That again goes into your psychology.
We've had people, not this group in particular, other groups.
Oh, yes.
Who have been just as vociferous against whatever we're investigating as communists. Make a good case out of it. Communists for 20 years, they hate everything. Go interview them. They don't want to. Go anyway. So you want knock on the door. Where have you been? Oh, I want to tell you something. You never know till you ask. And that's happened so many times. Sometimes we're word isn't convenience, but sometimes money brings out the information. I have no intent to insult you here.
According to Dillon, what's his name, the Secretary of Treasury, this government's money is in such trouble until...
You can still spend it.
Still, according to your government economists, the dollar itself is in such trouble, a person would be a fool to sell his soul for one of these decreasing dollars.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. You'd be a fool to sell your soul if the dollar was increasing. But this has nothing to do with selling your soul. I mean, if you look at it that way, okay.
Yeah,
but
depends on how you look at it.
Sure.
You insult my intelligence when not only they insult me, period, if they think I would tell them anything.
But it would be good, and I think in many ways it might be of some benefit to your organization. You know, if in fact we can eliminate people.
There's no government agency that can ever expect any information out of me that's in any way detrimental to any religious group or black group, for that matter, in this country. No government agency.
That's fine.
Because they should use that same energy to go and find who bombed that church down there in Alabama. And if these government agencies spend as much money and time and energy.
You know what somebody in the South is saying today? Few people would go up north.
Would you say to American citizens that this situation of surveillance and infiltration continues to this day?
Oh, yes.
On the dimension that you experienced?
Probably much larger by now.
Larger?
Oh, yeah.
A black person who takes a black leader and weaves his way into his confidence and then betrays him or her, or any other one for that matter, is decidedly beneath contempt. So if Gene Roberts were a part of all this, the man himself is totally beneath contempt.
With Gene Roberts as a trusted bodyguard, the New York City police now had a man on the inside who could closely monitor the activities of the Muslim Mosque Incorporated, the OAAU, and the minister as well. In the cold, early morning hours of February 14, 1965, a Molotov cocktail smashed through a window of the house he shared with his pregnant wife and 4 young daughters. The minister and his family escaped unharmed through the flames and onto the lawn, where they saw the raging inferno destroy their home.
I stood in my underwear, bare feet, in the middle of my driveway with a gun in my hand for 45 minutes, waiting for the police or waiting for the fire department to come.
Having the threats, that's all I get is threats. I get not less than 6 or 7 threatening phone calls every day.
He found his family's shelter at a friend's home, and the next day he flew to Detroit to keep a speaking engagement.
Distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies, it isn't something that made me lose confidence in what I'm doing, because my wife understands and I have children from this size on down, and even in their young age they understand. I think they would rather have a father or a brother or whatever the situation may be who will take a stand in the face of any kind of reaction from narrow-minded people rather than to compromise and later on have to grow up in shame and in disgrace.
As that meeting was breaking up, Malcolm was being introduced. He came on the stage. 2 individuals about 4 or 5 rows back started a commercial and get your hands out my pocket, nigga. I started walking towards them, and all of a sudden I see 3 individuals up front pumping shots at Malcolm. And they were moving from Malcolm's right toward the center aisle. Two people passed me, And that's when I met Hayer. He pointed his gun at me. Just as he fired, I turned sideways and hit him with the chair and knocked him down, and he got up and started scampering out.
I entered on the 166th Street side of the Audubon Ballroom. I started up the stairs, and I heard a voice, and I think that voice either had to be Earl Grant's or Brother Rubin's. And I heard him say, "Stop that guy, he just shot Malcolm." And I turned around, I stuck my foot out, he stumbled, and I turned around and ran back down the stairs, and about 10 or 20 people pounced on him. So he wasn't going anywhere. And 2 police officers emerged with their guns drawn and took the crowd. They rescued this man, turned out to be Thomas Hayer. They rescued him, but my recollection tells me that there was someone else there besides Thomas Hayer. I believe 2 men were put in the police car and taken to the police station.
As in Dr. King's assassination, a police superior has trouble with the truth. He tells reporters that 2 suspects were arrested at the Audubon. Later, official police reports say that 1 was arrested. Also, listen closely as the police official carefully handles the question about police on the scene.
We have 2 suspects in custody now.
Where were they arrested? Fired the shot?
I wouldn't know that at this time.
Where were they arrested, sir?
One of these men was arrested on the street by one of our patrolmen close by.
There were no police at this meeting, were there, Inspector?
There were no uniformed policemen assigned inside this ballroom.
No uniformed police on the scene. Does this mean that police out of uniform were there? And if so, why didn't they take action? What were they doing there? This behavior pattern rings a bell of striking similarity with the behavior pattern of the CIA overseas.
Assassin Hayer is transported to the 34th Precinct, where police recover an unused .45 caliber clip from his pocket. He is then taken to a hospital to have treated a bullet wound in his leg and other injuries he suffered in his escape. Back at the ballroom, people rush to the stage in horror and disbelief. There's snakes, snakes, snakes in the community, says bodyguard Carey 2X. As police reinforcements arrive, they lift him onto a stretcher commandeered from Columbia Presbyterian Hospital and roll him out the door and across the street to the emergency room. Despite airtight alibis, Norman Butler and Thomas Johnson are arrested at their homes a week after Thomas Hayer's capture. Hayer testifies in court that he was one of the assassins and that Butler and Johnson had nothing to do with the crime, but he refuses to identify his real accomplices. The jury convicts all 3 defendants of murder in the 1st degree, and they are sentenced to life behind bars. Norman Butler and Thomas Johnson will spend the next 2 decades in jail for a crime they did not commit. It would be more than 10 years before Thomas Hayer would reveal the names of his true accomplices and the nature of their murderous conspiracy.
Here we have Malcolm X's Wikipedia page. As we all know, Wikipedia is information we're forced to believe, even though probably all of it's false. But in any event, Malcolm X Wikipedia page. When you scroll down to his assassination, the part involving his death, and we have here assassination on February 21st, 1965 in Manhattan's Audubon Ballroom. And notice how it's hyperlinked, so you can check out an information page about the place where he was assassinated and the city. Malcolm X began to speak at a meeting of the Organization of Afro-American Unity when a disturbance broke out in the crowd of 400. A man yelled, blank, "Get your hand out of my pocket." As Malcolm X and his bodyguards moved to quiet the disturbance, a man rushed forward and shot him in the chest with a sawed-off shotgun. Now here we have sawed-off shotgun, which is also hyperlinked. 2 other men charged the stage and fired handguns, hitting him 16 times. Furious onlookers caught and beat one of the assassins as the others fled the ballroom. Malcolm X was pronounced dead at 3:30 p.m. shortly after he arrived at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. Now this is hyperlinked as well. Now notice, the man who murdered Malcolm X has no hyperlinked page. meaning that they don't want you to find out information about the guy who killed him. I find anomalies like this all over Wikipedia when referencing information, so it's one thing I think you should look out for.
As to the true killers, many people, from the black Muslims to the highest state authorities, could be implicated. 4 trails keep coming back. The New York Police Department. The living proof is Gene Roberts, the informer we've been following through this whole film. The CIA, which was very suspicious of the powerful links established by Malcolm X with African leaders. The FBI. Hoover and his staff were looking very closely into the friendship of the country's 2 enemies number 1, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And finally, the black Muslim leaders themselves.
Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X, and in it is contained passages from a speech by Louis Farrakhan. And here is one excerpt.
What have you got to say about it? Did you teach Malcolm? Did you make Malcolm? Did you clean up Malcolm? Did you put Malcolm out before the world? Was Malcolm your traitor or was he ours? And if we dealt with him like a nation deals with a traitor, what the hell business is it of yours?
That was in 1993.
Really? A few months ago.
Yeah. On Savior's Day, I believe.
I see.
Tonight, the Nation of Islam is reacting with anger to allegations that have put its leader under fire. Those sensational charges are in a story we told you about exclusively on News 4 New York last night. The widow of Malcolm X is accusing Louis Farrakhan of involvement in Malcolm's assassination.
After seeing the Speaker of the Nation of Islam say what he just did about Malcolm, it is not so hard to believe that Farrakhan may have had something to do with the assassination, which is exactly what the media and government want us to think. Why else would this have been such a televised and talked about occurrence? The truth of the matter is, Malcolm was expelled from the NOI for several reasons, and the group at the time felt as though Malcolm's views and actions during the months leading up to his assassination were against their beliefs. So they dealt with Malcolm as they would any Muslim who went against their non-violent approach to reaching world harmony. Malcolm had received bad press when he announced shortly after the death of John F. Kennedy that it was an inside job, or in his own words, the chickens have come home to roost. The Nation of Islam became very upset with this, and after Malcolm exposed the nation's leader, Elijah Muhammad, of impregnating several of his young secretaries, the wedge that many believe killed Malcolm X was set into place. The nation did not condone violence, and after the threats on his life and family, he pursued and armed himself in protection, something also forbidden by the NOI.
Why are they threatening your life?
Well, primarily because they're afraid that I will tell the real reason that that I'm out of the black Muslim movement, which I never told. I kept to myself. But the real reason is that Elijah Muhammad, the head of the movement, is the father of 8 children by 6 different teenage girls, 6 different teenage girls who were his private personal secretary. The one who first made me aware of this was Wallace Muhammad, Mr. Muhammad's son. And I had stated in a newspaper article about an effort to take my life back in January, and at that time the Muslims denied it. In fact, they tried to make it appear to my brother that I was insane. But on a program in Chicago called Hotline, that's moderated by Wesley South, John Ali, the national secretary, admitted, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, one of these days last week, that they absolutely were going to kill me.
What steps will you take to protect yourself from this threat?
I take no steps. I have a rifle. If anybody comes to my house without a good reason, I intend to try and use it, and that's all.
Right now?
No, I don't worry. I tell you, I'm a man who believed that I died 20 years ago, and I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Who killed Malcolm X? 3 black Muslims, members of the Nation of Islam, were convicted. But the current leader of the Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan, now acknowledges that words he spoke may have triggered the assassination.
As I may have been complicit in words that I spoke, I acknowledge that and regret that any word that I have said caused the loss of life of a human being.
Who killed Malcolm X? 3 black Muslims, members of the Nation of Islam, were convicted. 2 of them served 20 years. The 3rd is still not free. But the current leader of the Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan, has long been suspected as the instigator, the behind-the-scenes force who triggered the killing. Malcolm's late widow believed that, as do his children to this day. But now, finally, Atala Shabazz, the eldest daughter of Malcolm X, and Louis Farrakhan, agreed to talk about the assassination for the first time in front of a reporter. For Shabazz, not without some misgivings.
I did not know if I wanted to sit across from him. I didn't know if my heart could handle it.
Didn't know if she could sit with a man she still holds responsible for her father's death. Confronting Minister Farrakhan would not be easy, and for strength, she told us, she summoned the memory of her parents.
Before I came here, I prayed. It included my parents. They had to walk with me to the airport. They had to get me out of that hotel and into the property here.
You see, Atala Shabazz was there in the Audubon Ballroom in 1965 in New York to watch her father make a speech. She was there with her 2 younger sisters and her pregnant mother. And Atala, only 6 years old, watched as gunmen killed her father. Here's how her late mother, Betty Shabazz, described the murder.
I heard shots, and I saw people crawling on the floor. And so I got down too. But then when I was looking out and I saw someone look in amazement to the front, I knew they had shot my husband. And my children were crying, you know, what's going on? What's going on? Are they going to shoot us? I'm a child with a forever memory of the most significant man in my life standing at a podium and falling backwards. That's forever. Miss Shabazz, for several months, I carried the picture of your father with all of these bullet holes in his chest. And I looked at the man that taught me, the man that nurtured me, the man that was the example of a man to me. And I wept.
If you were around in the 90s, you may recall a popular talk show about black culture called Arsenio Hall. Many believe that one of his last shows, which featured Farrakhan as a guest, was one of the reasons the show went off the air in 1994. Here's a clip from that infamous episode.
It's only an hour show, so I figure we'll get right down to it. Why do you think there has been so much resistance to me having you on the show? I've even, not just white people, I've had black people tell me, what you need to do is get sick on Wednesday. True story. Get sick on Wednesday and cancel Thursday, Friday. Jesus said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Unfortunately, millions and millions of people on this earth are deprived of that particular truth of which Jesus spoke. And the great fear of those who hold our people in captivity is that our people will come into that particular truth that will make us a free people, justified and equal before God and man. But as we talked about this show before all of this controversy arose, I told you then and I tell you now, ask me anything that is in the hearts and minds of your listeners, white or black, Jewish or Gentile. And if I cannot answer those questions with truth, then I have no business being on this show. Let's start with, let us start with, because I have gone into the neighborhood and I've gone to the furthest suburb trying to find out what's on people's mind, my research department. One question that comes out of the neighborhood most often is, who killed Malcolm X? Since the movie, there are a lot of people who feel, you know, Minister Farrakhan had something to do with that. And I know you've heard it.
Yes, I've heard it.
more so now than ever before. When Malcolm was assassinated, if you would go back and read all of the accounts, the name of Louis X, as I was called at that time, was never, ever, ever mentioned. Why now? Farrakhan, who was a student of Malcolm and an adorer of Malcolm, but became an enemy of Malcolm when Malcolm split from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Because of that fact, and because of the fact that I wrote an article in the Muhammad Speaks saying that Malcolm was worthy of death, and several months later, Malcolm was assassinated, the press would like for black people to believe that Farrakhan had something to do with the assassination of Malcolm, not because they really believed that, because if that were so, the grand jury should open this case again and bring Farrakhan before courts of law. But the press does not want to do that. They want to try Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam in the media and castigate us in the media, but that is only because what is in my mouth is freeing black people all over the earth. And so if they can discredit me, then the truth that I speak will be of non-effect. I don't know who murdered Malcolm, but I believe with all my heart that two men who belonged to the Nation of Islam, who were picked up after Talmadge Hayer was picked up at the Audubon Ballroom, have been charged and found guilty of a crime that I believe those two men were innocent of. During the trial, Talmadge Hayer, who was the brother that was caught at the scene, said in court that the other two men were absolutely innocent. And when he was asked to name the co-conspirators in the murder of Malcolm, he refused to do it at that time. So those two innocent men went to prison for 26 years of their life. But during that time, Talmadge Hayer, under Kunstler, named all five of those who were with him in the assassination of Malcolm, and Kunstler tried to get the government to reopen the case, and they refused to do it because it suits the government's purpose to say that the nation, and that's a big name, the nation killed Malcolm.
Plan of action was basically what took place. Me and Leon, we took seats down in the front of the Audubon. We came early. We would drift into the Audubon. If indeed there was a search, then we could never enter. There was no search, so we drifted in just like we had hoped to. Leon Davis and myself took seats down front on the left-hand side. Benjamin and William, who carried the sort-of shotgun, sat right behind us, you know. And Wilbur sat somewhat in the back or almost in the middle. And our plan was, as soon as the brother came out to speak, that Wilbur would throw the smoke bomb to make a distraction, and that William would fire his shotgun, and that Leon and myself, we would fire our weapons, and then this break for the door.
In the interview you just witnessed, Hayer confessed that Leon David, Wilbur McKinley, and William Bradley were the ones involved. Let's take a look at the largest used encyclopedia on the planet.
Referencing back to the Wikipedia Malcolm X page, just to show you the effect of disinformation, which is a technique used by our government and the CIA intelligence agencies. It's also, all this stuff is also in our textbooks, and we're probably all taught it in university and in school and stuff like that about history, and it's all false. But in any event, we're going to go to the assassination part again. And here we have Talmadge Hayer, a Nation of Islam member, also known as Thomas Hagen, was arrested on the scene. Eyewitnesses identified two more suspects, Norman Butler and Thomas Johnson, also members of the Nation. All three were charged in the case. At first, Hayer denied involvement, but during the trial he confessed to having fired shots at Malcolm. He testified that Butler and Johnson were not present and were not involved in the assassination, but he declined to name the men who did join him in the shooting. All 3 men were still convicted. So that means that 2 of these men were put in prison for a very long time and lost their entire lives sitting in prison for a crime they didn't commit. Now here we go. Butler, now known as Muhammad Abdul Aziz, was paroled in 1985. He became the head of the Nation of Islam's Harlem Mosque in New York in 1998. He continues to maintain his innocence. Johnson, now known as Khalil Islam, was released from prison in 1987. During his time in prison, he rejected the teachings of the Nation of Islam and converted to Sunni Islam. He too maintains his innocence. Hare, now known as Mujahid Halim, was paroled in 2010, just last year.
Granted his parole. He's supposed to walk away from the New York State prison system on April 28th. Now, there's something called victims' impact statements that are supposed to take place. Malcolm was not only a world figure, he came from a large family on both sides. We got a call just a few minutes ago from the parole board in response to our letter to the governor of the state of New York, Governor Patterson, and he said, we didn't know where any of the family was. And we find that absolutely incredible. The Little family is well known on Malcolm's father's side. His nephew Ronell is also a published author and with us almost every year when we do the annual pilgrimage to the gravesite. So we do not accept their excuse for not allowing those victims' impact statements to be heard. But there are other questions that need to be asked. Talmadge Hayer did confess to what he did. We acknowledge that. It is a detailed confession where he names everybody who worked with him and who fired and took Malcolm's life away on February 21st. He did that out of personal guilt and to clear the other 2 men who were wrongly convicted and who were never released until they did their own time. The state of New York, the federal government of the United States, did not act on Hayer's confession. That is a major question for us. Why? And we believe that the short answer is that if you climb up that apple tree, you're going to find a rotten hand of the United States government in complicit with someone having pulled those triggers and making sure that that happened and that those men all got away scot-free. And finally, we have to ask some other questions too. There's dozens.
69-year-old Thomas Hagen, convicted of the 1965 assassination of Malcolm X, was paroled yesterday after serving 45 years of a 20-year-to-life sentence. But the question here is not whether a man convicted of murder can change and should be allowed to one day walk free. The point that we have to mention here is that when he actually walked out of the prison and into freedom, it was under the shadow of a sign naming a street in honor of the man that he once killed. It was Malcolm X Boulevard. So here we have to question how this man's legacy still lives on today. Joining us from our New York studio to discuss it, I have RT correspondent Marina Portnaya. Marina, first of all, tell me, were there any people out on the streets today perhaps that were angry or protesting because of this man's release?
Alona, well, nothing that we know of so far. As a matter of fact, if you turned on some of the local channels here in New York City, they were showing a full-screen picture of Thomas Hagen. There was no video of any protests or demonstrations taking place when he finally walked out to what we can call freedom. But many Malcolm X supporters and organizations did speak out condemning his release, saying that he should not have been paroled. And we have to mention, though, for the past 22 years, he was on a partial work release program where he was working during the week and spending 2 nights in prison.
What? Okay, that's just crazy. This sort of reminds me of something like diplomatic immunity. Check out this card. If you have this card, you can't get charged no matter what you do. And check out where you have to return the card if you find it. To the Office of Foreign Missions in Washington, D.C. I wonder how you get one of these. Probably got to be some sort of special agent or something.
Some of Malcolm X's speeches, some of what he said still carries through today. First of all, I want to play us a clip from one of his speeches.
This is American democracy. And those of you who are familiar with it know that in America, democracy is hypocrisy. Now, if I'm wrong, put me in jail. But if you can't prove that a democracy is not hypocrisy, then don't put your hands on me.
Now, Marina, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't those sound like the same echoes that we're hearing from the Tea Party and from all these polls that are showing how much distrust there is for the government right now in America?
Well, actually, to be technical, that is the exact quote I heard from Ralph Nader during the 2008 presidential elections. And yes, we do hear a lot of these complaints that democracy is hypocrisy.
Today we welcome Khalil Islam. 30 years ago, Mr. Islam was known as Thomas 15X Johnson. Mr. Johnson was one of 3 men convicted of the assassination of Malcolm X, sentenced to 25 years in prison. Mr. Islam was paroled after serving 22 years for the murder. He has steadfastly maintained his innocence. Who killed Malcolm X?
I think that's the question that none of us can actually answer. That is precisely the reason that this past Tuesday, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan is calling for a class action suit. The answer to that question is hidden in secret government files. And this American people, these black people who have been deprived of leadership for so many decades, we demand that the light of truth be shown on the secrets that are hidden in government files so that we can answer that question once and for all: who killed Malcolm X, who killed Martin Luther King, and even who killed John F. Kennedy.
Or Robert Kennedy, for that matter. George?
There are some things we can say, though. And we can say that the FBI conducted extensive spying on the Nation of Islam, on Malcolm X, telephone conversation, infiltrating each organization at its highest level. We can say that. We can also say Gene Roberts, the person who's pitching that famous picture, giving Malcolm X the mouth resuscitation, was an undercover New York City cop. Not only that, he told us, and we reported this in Emerger magazine, that a week before he saw a dry run, the assassination of Malcolm X, that he reported that to the New York City Police Department. They said they would pass it on. They did nothing, and when assassination went down, it went down exactly the way he saw it.
There seems to be a suggestion, gentlemen, just listening that is, that the FBI may have been involved in the assassination. Was there a climate that the FBI fostered so that the assassination could take place?
They bragged about it. The Chicago office bragged about it.
Are you suggesting that because of his international attachments, because of where he was going in terms of his leadership internationally,
correct,
that he became even a bigger threat to the FBI?
That's correct, because you see, Nasser and others would have helped him at the UN bring up the problem of African Americans in America. So he was moving in a direction that was making the national government here very uncomfortable.
Another thing we can say in terms of moving closer to the horn and also taking advantage of the fact that we have one of the men who served 22 years after being convicted, and that is that we can also say that there were 3 gunmen, and there were 3 guns. There was a shotgun, there was a 9mm, and there was a .45. Thomas Hare, who went to trial, essentially said that the other 2 men were not involved. Khalil Islam, who we have here, is one of those men whom he said during the trial was not, in fact, involved. So the question is, and I think at least the journalistic community that is interested, which is a very narrow community, or the reading public that is interested, which is also narrow, have come to the assumption that 2 of the 3 people on the trigger were not, in fact, in the ballroom that day. And so the question is, well, who were on the triggers?
Who do you think, Les? Who do you think was the mastermind behind the killing of Malcolm X?
Well, there's 2 questions. I mean, if you're talking about the mastermind or the person on the trigger. In other words, we have 2 triggers that are presently unoccupied.
Give me an answer to both, my friend.
Well, I think as a journalist, I need to know who's on the trigger before I can know who was his mastermind.
Khalil, we're talking all around you. We don't want to do that.
I'm listening. What he's saying is true when it comes to the 4 individuals. The affidavit was put in by William Kunstler in my behalf. As close as I've gotten to that was we had a brother named Imam Faiz, and he went to New Jersey to investigate, and he found out that these people indeed existed, and their whole history was just like Mujahideen ran it down to us.
All right, let's clear this up for our audience. Were you involved in the assassination of Malcolm X?
No, I wasn't.
How did you get shot?
I didn't get shot.
You did not get shot?
No, ma'am.
Were you involved around it, over it, under it? Then how did you get arrested?
I couldn't even walk. I was involved in an incident in the Bronx where a correction officer was shot named Benjamin Brown. And when that happened, one of Malcolm's close associates, and I want everybody to listen to this very carefully because it came out just exactly like I'm telling you. This is a coincidence. He got on TV and he said, you see what Thomas 15X did and Norman Brother? He said, those guys, man, he says, they're going to get all of us hypocrites. They're going to get me, they're going to get Malcolm, and it happened just like that.
So you were set up to take the fall, you think?
Behind that incident in the Bronx. And what the man said on national TV, and by the way, Malcolm was assassinated, I was in the tombs, and I was told through one of the correctional officers, you got a problem. I said, what kind of problem I got? He said, they found Leon dead in Boston. I said, he said, you know what he said in Newsweek? I said, yeah.
Tell us who, remind the audience who Leon was.
Well, Leon Amir was the karate instructor for the FOI. And that's why it led, you know, they believed that he was telling the truth. And they said that, all right, so the DA said, I found later on, so what these guys think, they're black mafia, so we're going to make sure that they don't never see daylight anymore.
Khalil, who do you think killed Malcolm?
Well, I would say that the individual that was shot on the scene, Mujahid, he told me himself that the 4 individuals that he gave up, he says we went there and we rehearsed it, just like somebody just said. We rehearsed it. And we came back that next week and we carried out the operation. He said he was very sorry that he destroyed my family and my business and whatnot, and this is the reason why he confided in me. For some reason, he just felt my spirit and we just locked together. And he ran the whole thing down to me. I said, well, listen, you should have never took the stand. You're not going to give up names. The DA is not going to let anybody go. You have to give up names.
So you felt that the moment you were arrested that there was no hope for you to get justice?
None whatsoever. I even stated that before when I was on trial. I told my co-defendant, I said, listen, I said, we're going to take a long trip. The only way we're going to get out is through the back door. It was sealed. I knew it was sealed. I had a lot of experience with, you know, street life and prison and stuff like that.
Let's take a break. And when we...
The matter is obviously one of great political sensitivity, both internationally and domestically. The department considered the matter one of sufficient importance to discuss with President Johnson, who, in turn, asked Mr. Hoover to secure any further information.
There were many things that Malcolm was doing that were deemed subversive, that was deemed threatening to the United States government, to the Johnson administration, to Hoover's mentality and the mentality of members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, as well as CIA.
And here was Brother Malcolm traveling around through Africa, equating, and in essence, saying that the United States was in no position to be talking, telling the rest of the world, giving the rest of the world lectures because of the things that were going on in this country.
Our desire, our prayer, that we can have a peaceful, intelligent rally here this afternoon. But at the same time, we see that they have surrounded us with many of their own agents in uniform and out of uniform.
They're going to use techniques that they were already using anyway against other groups, during the war, even before the war, specifically communist groups. But when they initiate the first counterintelligence program, or Cointelpro as they like to call it, the major target was the Communist Party, USA. And of course, that's going to set the stage for them to then, go after groups like the Socialist Workers' Party in 1961, Ku Klux Klan groups in 1964, the Nation of Islam, which had actually began, decades earlier. Counterintelligence deals with first getting the information and then using the information, or using some type of scheme, some type of program, some type of technique, some type of activity in order to hurt, in order to discredit, in order to disrupt, in order to destroy, or they like to use the term neutralize, which is kind of like an all-encompassing term, which means to weaken to the point that it's no longer a threat. Now, one of the keys to counterintelligence, though, is to plant a seed and then to rely upon people to react to that seed a certain way. And if they give you the reaction that you want, then a lot of times that will accumulate in you achieving your goal. Now, another point that you want to be clear on is that one of the things that counterintelligence has used for a very long time is simply to exploit existing weaknesses of people. Jealousies and envies, personality conflicts, anything that they could use in order to weaken a target.
Chicago also feels that any anonymous letters or calls at this time could possibly identify the source of the information and could, instead of causing disruption, solidify the royal family and Malcolm.
One of the unique things that the Bureau liked to do, which helped to cause division inside the ranks of the leadership of the nation, they would draft a letter that was very critical of Malcolm. And then what they would do is they would then send the letter to some of Malcolm's enemies inside the ranks of the national leadership. So much so that Elijah Muhammad, having received one of them, thought that Malcolm actually wrote the letter. All they wanted was for you to think that this is a legitimate letter, take the information in it seriously, and if it can plant a seed of dissension, if it can plant a seed that could cause some type of division, it was a successful counterintelligence apparatus. Now, something else that the Bureau also did as far as a nation, which was vintage FBI, was they planted newspaper articles.
So perhaps the same tactics were used against the civil rights movement. Heavy infiltration of the ranks, spread the seeds of dissension, then step back and let the blood spill.
I see it, Mr. Chairman, is for this committee to be able to figure out how to persuade the people of this country that indeed it did go on. And how shall we ensure that it never happen again? But it will happen repeatedly unless we can bring ourselves to understand and accept that it did go on. And I say that as one who worked as a United States attorney with the Bureau and have enormous respect for its capacities in the field of kidnapping, bank robbery, and a lot of other things. But am appalled to learn what if it's correct, the intelligence side of that Bureau was up to for so long.
If we would like to believe that the FBI would do all this viciousness and all of these things to an individual and would stop short of killing him, then we're out of our mind. In America today, if we believe the CIA would deal with foreign assassinations and would not consider it at home, that's like saying the mafia runs crooked gambling tables in South America, but honest ones in America. It just ain't true.
Any kind of activity that takes place on the floor of the Congress or the Senate, that's the government. Any kind of dilly-dallying, that's the government. Any kind of pussyfooting, that's the government. Any kind of act that's designed to delay or deprive you and me right now of getting full rights, that's the government that's responsible. And anytime you find the government involved in a conspiracy to violate the citizenship or the civil rights of a people, then you are wasting your time going to that government expecting redress. You're going to his court expecting him to correct the problem. He created the problem. He's the criminal. You don't take your case to the criminal, you take your criminal to court and accuse it of genocide and all of the other crimes that it is guilty of today. So what you and I have got to do is get involved. You and I have to be right there breathing down their throat. Every time they look over their shoulder, we want them to see us. You're living at a time of extremism, a time of revolution, a time when there's got to be a change. People in power have misused it, and now there has to be a change, and a better world has to be built, and the only way it's going to be built is with extreme methods. And I, for one, will join in with anyone, don't care what color you are, as long as you want to change this miserable condition that exists on this earth. Thank you.
Try a little social experiment right here. The next 4 minutes is gonna change your life, so listen up. Allow me to take y'all back in time to 1868, to when a company incorporates, and its name was the United States, based on the UK, and the trade is to turn every single newborn into a slave. Our true potential and meaning of life is lost. All I can think about is making a wage, and to disguise their demise, they change the names of their employees to citizens. And just like every other privately owned business, there needs to be a president. All of our sovereignty lost to corporate greed at the cost of our freedom. Toss aside, work for the man or die. You'll be 90 years old the time you retire. This is the hook, make sure that it sinks in real deep. Then let it ash in front of words like verbal weapons speak. From coast to coast, shore to shore, and north to south, we must unite. With these facts, the strongest weapon is your brain and mouth. Our currency creates the current of the sea. The cash flows in streams, but it hardly reaches you and me. All rivers have two sides, on each side is a bank. All wars have had two sides, on each side was a bank. So many have exposed this, but so quickly they were sank. When the ship docks itself, the term is called a birth. And we the product down the birth canal. When we reach the dock we're cursed. Bodies of water, we're born into the slaughter. This is the hook, make sure that it sinks in real deep. Then let it ash in front of words like verbal weapons speak. From coast to coast, shore to shore, and north to south, we must unite. With these facts, the strongest weapon is your brain and mouth. This is the hook, make sure that it sinks in real deep. Then let it ash in front of words like verbal weapons speak. From coast to coast, shore to shore, and north to south, we must unite. With these facts, the strongest weapon is your brain and mouth. Indoctrination, for centuries our elders bled, so we could have a life of freedom, water to drink and bread. We made a profit from things we need to live each day. Maritime admiralty law with money soaked in blood we're paid. Our minds aren't free, just take a look around, you'll see. The word parliament is too fresh words to speak and deceive. And everywhere you look are signs, so wake up from your dreams. Split the word governmental down the middle, it's so simple, yours to discover. Explore what's undercover, we ain't gone forever. This is a life, ain't got no other. This is the hook, make sure that it sinks in real deep. Then let it ash in front of words like verbal weapons speak. From coast to coast, shore to shore, and north to south, we must unite. With these facts, the strongest weapon is your brain and mouth. This is the hook, make sure that it sinks in real deep. Then let it ash in front of words like verbal weapons speak. From coast to coast, shore to shore, and north to south, we must unite. With these facts, the strongest
information about God. He gives man instincts. He sets the rules in opposition.
This is the hook. Make sure that it sits in real deep. The letter S in front of words like verbal weapons speak. From coast to coast, shore to shore, and north to south, we must unite. With these facts, the strongest weapon is your brain and mouth. This is the hook. Make sure that it sits in real deep. The letter S in front of words like verbal weapons speak. From coast to coast, shore to shore, and north to south, we must unite. With these facts, the strongest weapon is your brain and mouth. So spread the word, literally. It's time to get the human race back up on our feet. Let's keep that money in the streets where it belongs. And I don't care what I say on record. The music industry is just another industry. Hopefully you learned something from this. It's your choice.